Okay, welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at selection. So far, we've seen that our code is executed down the page in order, and every line is executed so far. However, in reality, and with the programs that we need, um, we can't just always have every bit of code executed and also down the page in order. So we actually need some control flow. And there's different things that we need in control flow. But the first one we're going to look at is selection. Okay? So selection is based on some decision you decide whether or not to do some bit of code. So this could be, for example, um, if the user clicks on an icon, then open the program. Or if it's, say, a video game, if the user presses left, then the character moves left. If you've got an ATM, um, if the user selects withdrawal, then do a withdrawal. Okay, so we need this to make decisions in our program. It may be based on some mathematics, it may be based on the user's input, it could be based on a whole range of conditions. So let's jump into the code and have a look at what this looks like. All right, so we have a little bit of code here, and on the left we have what's called a flow diagram. Now I've kept this generic so that it can be applied to whatever you're doing, but you can put your details and your code inside of the flow diagram, which you'll see in the subject and in the labs. So with the code, just imagine main and your includes are already there. We're not always going to write those in the examples. Obviously, when actually coding, you need to put that. So as we said, the code is executed down the page, and we reach this declaration and initialization of the variable called value. And we assign it the value 4. Okay. Now, this in relation to our flow diagram is this part here. Okay. So what we're saying here is that before an if statement or before selection, we can have as many statements as we like. Okay. So you can have 100 statements, you could have one statement, you could have a whole heap of things up here. We then reach the selection. So the selection is this if here. Okay. Now, what this says is if this part in brackets, brown brackets, is true, then and only then will we go inside of these two braces here. Okay. So remember back to the last video, true is anything that's not 0. Okay, so you could put something like if 4 minus 4, and that would come out as false. Okay, or I could go 4 minus 2, and that would come out of true. Okay, so remember that true means that any value that's not 0. So this if and this part here is for our flow diagram, this part here. And we've got true and false written here. So if we have a look at this example, we've got if value times 2 is 8. Value is 4. Okay. And the order of operations, the multiplication has higher precedence than the equals. So 4 times 2 is going to be 8. We say, is 8 equal to 8? Yes. So we get true, which is a 1. And we have if 1, that's not 0, so it's true. So we would go down this path here. If we got a value that wasn't true, then we would go down this path here. We can have a look at that shortly. So here we go inside of here and we print value multiplied by 2 is 8. Okay, so this part here is C. Now, this doesn't have to be one statement, it could be a bunch of statements, so you can have as many things as you like between these two braces. The other thing that you need to ensure you do is this indentation here of one tab. Okay, it will still run, but no one will be, it'll be very hard for others to be able to read it, and it's very unprofessional not to have that tab there. Okay, next, once whatever's done inside there, we keep going and then we just print goodbye. So this part is D. Now, if we change this, so if we change this such that this was, say, 7, okay, then we would reevaluate this, okay, and when we get to the 8 is equal to 7, we get a false, which is 0. We've got if 0, which is false. And so we just go straight down to D. Okay? So here you can see the selection. You can see that we can make a decision based on some condition. Okay? These conditions can be complex or they can be extremely simple. Now, often is the case that we don't want to just leave it here. We want to do something if this is false. So this is where our else comes in. So here, the first part looks very similar, okay? And it basically is the same as before. So we've got this declaration, which is up the top. We've got this if, which is here, which is this condition. If it's true, we go to this same spot we went to before. However, we also have this else here. So instead of going straight down to the end, if this is not true, then we do this part here. Okay? Once again, it can be as many lines as you like. And at the end, they both end up at the same point. Okay, so they end up at this E point. So remembering 4 times 2 equals 8 will give us 1. So if we followed that, we'd end up down this path here. However, if we made this 7, this would come out as false, and we'd go down this path here. So we'd actually print value multiplied by 2 is not 8, and then goodbye in that case. Okay, so we can make a decision, and if it's true, we do one thing, and if it's false, we do another thing. Okay, so this means that no matter what, at least one of these things will be printed. Okay, so we're guaranteed that at least one of these will be printed. So I mentioned a menu system before, and with what we've got so far, it'd be very hard to do that. What we want to do next is look at selection based on a range of conditions. So if the user presses 1, do this, else if they press 2, do this, and so on. So this is where we have else if, which I kind of already said. So here is a little bit different. Instead of the else, we have else space if and another condition here. So we'll go through this. So we're declaring at the start, so that's our A. We have this first condition here, which is B. If this is true, then we do C. Okay, so we go inside there and do this. But then, if this is false, then we have another condition here, which is our else if condition. So we'll call this D. Inside of that, if that's true, we do E, and no matter what, they all do F. Okay. So with this here, if we have a look, value is 4. 4 times 2 equals 6 gives 0. Okay. So we would not execute this. Okay, so we keep going down, and then we ask the question, is 4 times 2 equal 8, which gives 1. So that's true, and so we'd go into here and then come down and go to F. Okay, so we print that one and that one. If we went about changing this 4 to, let's say, 3, then 3 times 2 equals 6 would give a 1, and we print value multiplied by 2 is 6, and then we go down to the end. Okay, so it skips over checking this other else if. Okay, so it doesn't bother looking at this other else if, it just goes to the end if that one is true. Okay, now what happens if we have, let's say, a 2 here? Okay, so 2 times 2 is 4 equals 6 is 0, so it's false. Value times 2 equals 8, 2 times 4 is not equal to 8. So we just go to the end in this case. So here we just keep going down and we just end up at F. So to print neither of these, we just print goodbye. Now with these else ifs, you can keep adding as many as you need. So you can have if this, else if this, else if this, else if this, else if this. But what if we want to always do something? Okay, so in this case here, we've got the case that will print this, this, or nothing with this part of the code. So sometimes we want a default case, and this is where the else comes back. Okay, so it's starting to look a little bit more complex. We've forgotten the semicolon. Just add that there. So here, what we want to do is we want to do what we did before. So if the value times 2 is 6, we print this one. Else if the value times 2 is 8, then we print this one. And then we've got this else. So if it's neither of these two, then it at least prints something. Okay, so it prints value multiplied by 2 is neither 6 or 8. Okay, so this gives you a default. So for example, if you were implementing a menu system and you had the user entering either 1, 2, 3, or 4, okay, if they entered 1, then it printed out hello. If they print 2, it says hi. If they enter 3, it says goodbye. And if they enter 4, it says bye bye. So if they enter 5, it may print invalid option or something like that. And that would be your else case. Okay, so your else just captures everything else. So here, once again, we have the int value 4. So we're declaring value, so that's our A. We have this if, which we've seen before. So that's our B. We have what's printed if that's true. We have the else if, which is here. We have what's printed if that's true, which is here. And the difference here is that at the end, we don't go down to the end if it's false. Instead, we go over here. So this is our F. Okay. Now notice that there's no if here. There's no condition. It's just else. All right. A lot of students feel like putting brackets there and writing something there. It won't compile. And then at the end, no matter what, we go to the end. Okay. So in this example here, we've got 4. This is false. This is true. So we'd go A, B, D, E, and then G. Okay, so we print value multiplied by 2 is 8, and then goodbye. Now, the last thing I want to show you with ifs and else's and elseifs is nested ifs. So, if some condition is true, then I might want to check something else. Okay, so this is where nested comes in. Okay, so here you can see that if this condition is true, then I ask another question and then evaluate based on that. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So we've got int value is 4, so that's our declaration, which is here. We've got the question if value times 2 is 6, which is this condition here. Now, if this is true, then we're going to do everything inside of these braces. So here we have value multiplied by 2 is 6, which we've seen before, but then after that I ask another question. Okay, so that's a D. If value is greater than 2, then we also print this. Okay, so that's our E. From there, there's nothing more to do there, there's nothing more to do there, so we go to F. Now you could insert some code in here if you wanted to, and that would just be here if you did, okay? But I haven't put that in the example. So in this case here, we've got values 4. 4 times 2 is not equal to 6, so that would result in 0, and we just go straight down here to F. Okay, and we just print goodbye. However, if I go and change this to a 3, value times 2, 3 equals 6, 3 times 2 is 6, 6 is equal to 6, so we get a 1. We print out value multiplied by 2 is 6. So we've got to that point. Then we ask, is 3 greater than 2? Yes. So we go in here, also value is greater than 2, and then we go back and print goodbye. Now, with this, these are only a couple of examples, and there's infinite ways that you could arrange these, such the complexity of your problem. So you could have many layers of if statements nested in each other. You could have if else ifs here, you could have an if here, you could have an else if here, you could have an else. There's infinite ways to arrange these, okay, and there's statements inside them as well. Now, the other type of selection statement that we use in C is switch statements. And that's something you can do with some reading on if you like. For us, we can do everything with if, else if, and else. So we're just going to focus on that to keep it simple for now. So there won't be a video on that right now, maybe later. All right, thank you.